an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Ascend, chapters 6.5 through 9.5. In these chapters, so Brian goes to Elgin Spears and tells him he wants the procedure. And I was so sure that while our friends were in the building, they would stumble across Brian. And they don't, which means either that's coming or they're not gonna find him and it's done already. How long does this take? I have a lot of questions. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Heather for commissioning this episode. Heather is here in the chat and delighting in the fact that it is Friday. Welcome, Heather. So this section is really full of surprises. First of all, I don't know why I didn't expect our crew to try and invade Elgin Spears' compound, I guess is the word I want, this quickly. I think that I figured there would be more planning involved that we would have to sit in on and see, but not so. They are, already in position and about to bust in this place when it starts. But before we get there, we have to finish up the remainder of chapter 6. And because the place that we ended was Douglas saying, "Since when has a Scotsman looked for an easy fight?" And where we go after that is Chance. And he is dealing with his, relationship with Reggie. And he doesn't know, we go from Chance's POV to Reggie's POV. And it's really obvious that they both truly care about each other. And Chance cannot figure out what Reggie's problem is. He's like, I don't look, she and I see eye to eye on everything, and I know that she's a good person, and I know that she understands what's at stake here. So I can't understand why she isn't on my side with this. And he leaves a message. I'm going to read this message. "Hey, Reg, it's me, Eric. Well, you know that. I just wanted to talk to you, to hear your voice. I've got an op coming up, and you know how those go. I need to talk to you soon, love. I miss you so, so much. We need to work this out, what's going on now. It isn't right. It isn't the way it should be. I love you, Reggie. You're the most important thing to me. If you tell me to come home, I'm on the next plane. I mean it. Ring me when you get free." I'll tell you what, that's a damn good message. Top tier message, Chance. Truly. I wonder if Reggie is going to hear about the injury that he sustained and how she is going to feel about that. Because what we have after that is really odd. We go to Reggie and she's listening to his message, and it's really clear that she wants to call him back. And she does it she's denying herself in a way that I'm like, why? What is making this feel like it's a fight against something? You're happy, he's happy, why can't you just do that? And there's a sentence here, and I want to ask you about this, Heather, because there's clearly a typo, but usually I can tell what something is meant to mean despite a typo. And this one I don't get. It says, "She gave her defiance voice, and in her opinion, life, and it felt good to do so." I feel like I missed something, unless I'm just reading that wrong. Or was it, she gave her defiance voice, and in her opinion, gave it life, and it felt good to do so? Is that what that is meant to mean? I think I just misunderstood what that was supposed to mean there. But I think the "and" is implied. The "and" in her opinion is implied. I'm sorry. I'm going to move past this because I'm sure that it's not fun to listen to me puzzling this out. But Heather says, yeah, I think that's what that meant. Okay. But yeah, it's like she almost deletes his message. The denial here is not her denying calling him. She denies deleting it to remove the temptation to call him back or listen to it again. She is in some position where it like pursuing things with him is not part of a plan that she's part of. And yet she obviously really truly does care about him. So her phone rings again. And she's like, okay, if this is Chance, I am going to answer it. And she turns over. It says the number wasn't Chance's, and Reggie shivered. Reluctantly, she slid her fingertip across the screen to unlock it and put the phone to her ear. We need to talk, an electronically disguised voice intoned before Reggie could offer any greeting. All right, Reggie replied softly. It's late. I don't care. Give me 10 minutes. I'll be waiting. What is going on? I don't like this at all. I feel like I have just been sort of taking it for granted that nobody can, like, handle Reggie. And by handle, I mean just, like, manipulate or otherwise sort of coerce her because of her mind-reading ability. Being near an enemy who can read your mind is an extremely dangerous proposition. And I don't know how well known her ability actually is, but this feels like it's somebody that she has been working with for a little while. Doesn't seem to be entirely voluntary. But they must know. And I am assuming they have figured out a way to protect themselves against it, or they don't care and aren't actually hiding anything. Or maybe, no, I was going to say, maybe they don't actually like meet in person, but they say we need to talk. And she says that she'll be there, you know, so clearly that is part of it. But I'm just super curious about what this is. I feel like, is it possible that Reggie is a Genegier and there's something going on there? Or, you know, because we know that there are Incarna and Genegier around that we haven't met yet. But we have Dr. Linden working in the lab, and if Reggie were one of his kind, I feel like he would know and would have mentioned it. I feel like this would have come up. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe because they're not working together anymore, he feels like it's not his secret to share. But that seems pretty relevant to me. If it turns out that's what it is and he didn't share it, I'm going to side I am quite a bit. But yeah, so that's what's going on with them, and we don't get resolution to that in this section. And then we go to chapter 7. So what can I do for you, Brian? And I was immediately like, fuck. Brian just goes straight to Dr. Spears. And truly, I get it. I've said this before. I really do. But it's so annoying because I know that Jordan had this moment of like, I should tell him, but he's asleep or he has to go, forget it. And I was like, where is he going though? And then she goes and like shares everything with the rest of her team. And we get a couple of overlaps here of each of them not communicating or sharing because she tries to get in touch with him and even says it's urgent and he doesn't take her call. And I am so interested to see how he's going to feel later when I already felt a bit of a way, as we know, about the fact that she decided to share all of this with everyone else except for Brian in the first place. That felt highly shady to me. But then he doesn't take her call. So now it's like, yeah, she did something shitty, but also he's being really impulsive and isn't like I think he views going and doing this without checking in with her first as him taking charge and giving her what she won't admit she actually wants. I just am like, I'm so frustrated with these two. All of this could have been avoided. And it's like, it's sort of dancing on the edge of that thing for me that I can get frustrated with, where we're going to manufacture drama by having characters not talk to each other. And it's like I said, it's dancing on the edge of that. It feels like there are established character traits that make me believe that they wouldn't. But there are also like aspects of this where I just feel like, but wouldn't she have asked more questions about where he is heading? Wouldn't she have like realized that sharing with everybody else without sharing with him, it was just her doing the thing that got them in a fight all over again? It's just sort of, you know, one of those where you sort of have to be like, people just kind of aren't great all the time, and just chalk it up to that. So it doesn't bother me too much. It bothers me in just the sort of human way, you know? So yeah, he comes in and immediately Dr. Spears can sense that something is going on. Brian is agitated. He's aggressive. He's angrier. There's just a focus and like intensity to him in this conversation that Spears hasn't seen before. And Spears is kind of like, ooh, this guy might be perfect. This could be really good. So Brian starts off with, I need a favor. And of course, Dr. Spears is like, oh, sweet. I love giving favors because then you owe me forever. This is great. And he says, I want to undergo your awakening procedure. And Spears is genuinely like, word? He didn't expect that. I kind of thought he'd see that coming, but it doesn't seem like it. And he's like, this dude is altruistic. It doesn't seem like he's super ambitious. This isn't the kind of person I would expect to be after more power. And he notices Brian playing with his wedding ring and realizes, oh, okay, I think this is something to do with his relationship. And he says, this is for Jordan, isn't it? Without hesitation, Brian nodded. Yes, I'm trusting you with this, you know. Nobody else can know, not even Karen. So let's see. Oh, yeah, I meant to mention this. Despite assurances by the so-called civilized governments, there had been precious little legislation that protected awakened humans' rights signed into law. It was a risk letting anyone know what you were if you happened to be awakened, and only Spears' very public fight to prevent the United States government from accessing his patient records kept the names of hundreds of awakened from being released. That didn't matter to him as much as keeping the exact numbers of awakened he had off the books out of public record. Spears was impressed by Brian's courage and trust. Brian, my friend, your secrets and your lovely wife's are safe with me. I was like, honestly, Brian, how do you hear that sentence and not immediately go, you know what? Never mind. I'm out. That is such a, like that. There's just like the wording of that is just so slimy. I just, no. And then it's another man, isn't it? An awakened. Yes, Brian growled, though the surge in his anger was fleeting. And no. Spears shook his head and poured a measure of whiskey into a tumbler. This is why I don't maintain relationships with women. They're fickle and selfish, enslaved by their emotions, and unable to detach themselves when the situation calls for it. Has she fucked him? And I was like, what? And it's addressed immediately. The word was low, and one he wouldn't normally use, but Spears had a goal. As soon as the words left his mouth, Brian tensed with rage, his hard-eyed look changing entirely into a scowl. And I know he has a goal, but I'm not entirely sure if that was meant to just make Brian angry and the anger is what he's after, or if putting the idea of her fucking another guy into Brian's mind is supposed to push him to make this decision more quickly, it seemed like he's perfectly willing to make this decision immediately to begin with, so it doesn't seem necessary to me. But yeah, so Brian asks, how long does the process take? A few days. I'll initiate it, and the rest is simply allowing it to progress and monitoring the reaction. And he says, look, I gotta be honest with you. There is the potential that this will be fatal for you. Like, I can start this immediately, or we can schedule something a month or two out from now. But I need you to be aware of the risks that this poses here. And Brian immediately calls his office and tells Lena to clear his schedule. And then, did she say it was an emergency? Urgent? Did she say why? No? Then I'll call her when I get back. Brian. You can't take 10 minutes to call your wife back when she left a message saying that it was urgent. Also, did he not get a text? Like, did she not contact him on his own phone? Why wouldn't she? It didn't occur to me to, like, ask that question. Unless this isn't Jordan. It says, did she say it was an emergency? It doesn't say Jordan left the message. I'm just assuming based on this response, because it follows with, tell her I had an obligation to take care of and that I love her. And I just found that really weird that, like, she doesn't get in touch with him. She just leaves a message with his secretary. Why wouldn't she text him and alert him that something's about, like anything? And also just being like, I'm going to leave a message with my secretary that I'll be away for a few days with no explanation after we just had this big fight. I don't know. Spears smiled as Brian hung the phone up. I always liked your decisiveness, Brian. So he asks what Brian wants to do. And honestly, I don't know why it came as a surprise. I didn't know you could pick things off a menu. I thought you were basically going to be awakened and whatever was in your genes was what wound up being your ability. And it wasn't really like something you could predetermine. It was up to the kind of code locked in the deeper genetic vaults, essentially. But he says, do you want to leap tall buildings, heal from injury, throw a bulldozer? Brian tucked his phone in his jacket pocket. Yes. He smiled for the first time since his arrival, just as long as I don't lose my good looks. I'll be careful not to damage them. Spears chuckled and returned the gesture. And then he says, I may have a solution for your problem. A way to increase Jordan's interest. Consider it a luxury option, an insurance package, a relationship motivator, entirely harmless, but exceptionally effective. A way to prevent Jordan's eye from straying. He doesn't even ask what it is. He just says, do it. Okay. Brian, you have truly lost it. Sir, you're just fucking... You haven't asked nearly the questions you should be asking. Spears freely warns you that this might kill you. And you don't inquire any further about that. There's no, like, I would just have a laundry list. I completely sympathize with the whole, like, I am going to need to level up my power in this relationship because it's I wholly sympathize with him wanting to do this. I just don't get how little he asks about various aspects of this. I would really want to know everything. Like, the way that's mentioned, what I'm imagining this is going to be is something pheromone related, like what the Crimson Shark, the effect the Crimson Shark had on Jordan, which is essentially him roofying his wife, which is gross. And it doesn't, like, I can't even say, stop and think about what that really means that you're doing to her, because Brian has no idea about that effect, as far as I know. I don't know how much Jordan has shared with him, but I don't think she's ever mentioned to him about the Crimson Shark and that like weird moment of almost being like brainwashed, essentially. So he knows so little about this that he doesn't even know what questions to ask because he hasn't got any information. And he's just going to go in there and do it. And truly, sir, if this goes wrong, I am not even going to be as mad at Dr. Spears as I am at you for being this irresponsible. There is so much that you should be sitting down and figuring out before you go for this. And I can't stand that you just like lied to your wife about where you were going. You're lying to her about where you are now. And then you're going to roll in awakened and think that's not going to completely fracture everything. Sir, you need to get some therapy. You need to go cool off somewhere for something. You're just not, this is not going to be good, even if it works. And I'm assuming it will work. The whole thing with Spears is that he is thinking he's going to be able to turn Brian into like somebody who's working for him. And I don't know how he intends that to happen, but I feel that there has to be a reason for his confidence that that's going to be how it goes. He must know that there is maybe like some sort of switch that he can flip somehow to get Brian to do what he asks him to do eventually. It could be he's just depending on Brian being on his side of things, but I'm not like, I feel like Dr. Spears is not somebody who is going to bet on the goodwill of somebody. He is going to put something in there to control them. That is how he tends to operate. So I'm not thinking that's going to be left up to chance. And this means that eventually Brian and Jordan are going to have to face off, and I don't like it. And frankly, I don't know what kind of abilities he's going to get, but I don't like his chances against Jordan because he's just straight up doesn't have any like fighting training, you know, so he can be super strong and fast and whatever. I don't know that that's going to be enough up against somebody who has had like decades of military training, you know, we'll see. But yeah, he says like, Jordan doesn't need to know. I wanted it to be a surprise. And I'm like, I hate it. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Heather is in the chat, says, it's keeping him off balance. And also Spears is a bit of a sadist. Okay. So he's just saying, did she fuck him to just be an asshole for fun? I thought she had been trying his phone. Maybe I missed that. That's possible. I might have missed it. That's for naturally awakened folks. Spears' process is different. Oh, okay. I don't think I realized. Do we know very much about his process? We don't, right? It's not that I've forgotten. It's just that we haven't been told a lot about it. And she says, and that is why Spears dropped the F-bomb. To convince him to do the, like, be sexy to your wife bonus edition. Yeah, I guess I could see. It's just, Brian. He just doesn't. There is a consent issue in here, man. Guy, you know? And, like, I've been sort of wondering about what's going on between Jordan and Jason, because it feels like there has to be some kind of pheromone thing. The reaction that she has is so intense and immediate. It isn't just a simple attraction. It feels like there has to be something else going on. So I'm not trying to insinuate that it's like not a factor naturally occurring in situations at all, but it's a different thing when you're getting it installed versus something that is naturally occurring because of like who and what you are. I'm really like at this point low-key rooting for Jordan to cheat on Brian just because I want to see how bonkers sex between two awakened people would be, because I feel like they are just going to break everything in the room, probably put holes in the walls. Like, that is just wherever they go, is going to have to be a place that can get damaged and they can walk away from it without being in trouble. I just feel like it's going to be, I mean, right? Because she has to hold herself back all the time with Brian, and she has mentioned that. What happens if she doesn't? And what happens if he doesn't? So then we go to chapter 8. And they are preparing to go into the facility, and it is raining, and it's mentioned that it's actually pretty good for them that it's raining, because the rain will like mask their movement on cameras. The sound of it will hide their footsteps and whatnot. So this is actually a pretty good situation. And they're going in there while Ryan is accessing the security network with her power. And we get something really cool from this later. Initially, we've got Viper as she is going by in this scene. Viper had been surprised when Ryan chose the code name Widow. She said it was because she operated in a web of computer networks ensnaring information through, though Viper thought differently. In her element, Ryan was every bit as dangerous and skilled as Jordan, if not more so. So I thought that was interesting, that she thinks differently, and I'm like, does she think that there's like a secret reasoning behind that? Ryan is an actual widow, is she? I'm just curious what it is that Jordan thinks is actually going on here. So they head in, and the first thing that they do, we get to see some of what Scorp can do. I don't think we knew a lot about his powers, but he can extend claws from his hands, and he also can like stick to things, you know, like a lizard climbing up the side. So he uses that ability to like hold the glass that he just cut and like pull it out. And they're able to like use adhesive to seal it back up again, which is pretty neat. So it looks like at first glance, there has been no intrusion at all. And Viper is turning invisible and then going up to the various security cameras and spraying them with black spray paint, which that is pretty neat, I think. The idea of just, yeah, I'm going to be completely invisible to the camera until it's hit with black paint, and you aren't going to be able to even see where that came from. I'm very curious if there's any like infrared. It doesn't seem like it, because I'm assuming her ability doesn't work on infrared. But yeah, I think this is this is like one of those situations where I kept feeling the way that Jordan does, because it goes so smoothly. Everything that they do, it seems like that was just too easy. And later on, we see what's going on with Ryan, and it's pretty clear, like, this actually isn't easy. Ryan is just doing a crazy thing. But I can't lie, I was very, very worried that this was all a setup. And I'm not totally sure still that it isn't a setup. It feels like if it were, the trap would have been sprung by the end of the section that I'm reading, but I might be wrong about that. So I love this. There's a couple of guards who are talking about this like online game that they play, and she comes up to them completely invisible, but like attacking while invisible is pretty hard. So she just decides to become visible for a split second before she clocks them both in the face with her boots and knocks them out. So embarrassing, these guys. Oh my God. And then they have to go to the elevator to go downward into like the bottom of the facility. But there is clearly some kind of like command or retinal scan, something to get access that they don't have. And Stryker just reaches down and rips the bottom of the elevator open so that they can drop down through it. And it's a lot further than they expected. There is clearly more of this facility than they were prepared for. So by the time the team made their individual drops, Scorp had cut a small hole in the elevator door with the tip of one of his claws. 50-foot hallway with a stainless steel floor. There's a sensor at the far end near a set of double doors, but I can't see any other features along the way. There's some sort of low-level EM field over the floor's surface. It's making my nose itch. I really do enjoy that. And then we get, though she didn't know the full extent of Scorp's abilities, Viper had been impressed with what she had seen so far. I don't need that on top of everything else. Look. Having an inexplicable, intense attraction to somebody is already difficult. But then you put respect for their competence on top of it, and like, I'm kind of dead in the water. I mean, that's it for me. Once that happens, feeling like you can trust a person's ability, that's the end of that. I feel like this spells doom for Brian. We'll see. I don't know what Brian's going to be like after this. I hope he doesn't die. On the one hand, it would probably be simpler if he died. No offense, Brian, but it kind of would. However, I really do want to see what happens if you undergo this procedure voluntarily. I am dying to know. So I'm excited. Okay, so with no other options left, Viper just decided to push on. So she does this thing where she like flies through there with her, acrobatic sort of ability and is carrying a couple of ball bearings and just with perfect precision chucks the ball bearings while she is midway through the room in the air at each of the sensors and is just hoping as she sails through that the floor isn't electrified because she has a protective, suit on, but she has never tested it in that regard before, it seems like. And she's just sort of like, I really don't want to know. I don't want to try that out right now, which I can't blame her. And yeah, it works. It's a pretty intense moment. And they come through once she has disabled all of that stuff. Inside a massive room larger than an aircraft hangar, there were dozens of machines. All of them looked to be some sort of self-contained laboratory unit that had several robotic arms protruding off a tall, square body. At the top of the machine, there was a sensor unit that looked like a large silver shower head, also attached to a mechanical arm. There was a stainless steel examination table mounted to each of the lab units, and to Viper's dismay, each of the tables had a person restrained by 5 steel bands placed at even intervals to maximize their effectiveness. The arms methodically moved above each of the subjects, using various implements that served as hands to go about their work. None of the people trapped in the machines moved, though Viper could see the slow rising and falling of their chests. All the while, the numerous mechanical servos hummed and whirred as they went about their task, the machines oblivious to Viper and the others. This was when I was so sure she was going to notice that one of them was Brian. And I don't know that one of them is Brian. He may not be in this part of the facility. I don't really know how it works, if this is part of the experimental area and that Brian's in a part where it's like, oh no, I've actually figured it out and the proper stuff is happening over here. But I was just waiting for them to stumble across him, and it doesn't happen. And granted, we're still in it by the end of this section, so they may still, but it feels like things have gone so left that finding him at the end of this would be too complicated for getting out again. I don't see, because things are really there's all these drones that show up and it starts to really be a problem. So yeah, I don't think she will discover that he's in here. And I just was waiting the whole time for Spears to step out and be like, oh, I mean, you can keep on fucking with my shit if you want, but I definitely have your husband completely at my mercy. So you may want to rethink this. And that's not how it goes at all. So I was just unprepared for the lack of Brian, really. And they have Chance take pictures and video of it all just to make sure that they have record of what's going on. But it's not part of their mission. And so Viper is we just have to keep focused on our actual objective. So then we go to Ryan's POV. And here we get this sort of like mental tech fight. And it's neat, I think. This really reminds me of a scene in the Dresden Files where there is a mental fight between Molly and a character that just goes by the Corpse Taker. And they have to sort of create mental traps for one another. And it manifests as looking like a battleground. And there's just a whole landscape that they make mentally to fight one another in. And this reminds me of that a lot, but because there's such a different approach to it being generated code, it's a lot easier to sort of exploit the mechanics of how this sort of thing works. Because if it's purely mental, you can do practically anything that you can think of and just get the effect you want in a lot of ways. And in this, it's like I can see what those things are doing, and I have to figure out what to do to incorporate their usual labor into the plan that I'm going with. So Widow concentrated and applied another portion of her multitasking brain to the problem. She began to attack the security around the network's internal communication system, trying to draw out whomever or whatever was stalking her. There's just this presence that she keeps feeling, and it keeps darting away right before she manages to get and turn around and really see it. She can tell it's something in the network and it's something that's in control somehow, but she can't get it face to face. So she starts handling all of this and shutting a lot of different sections down. And then this is sort of interesting for me. For good measure, Widow added anchors for her consciousness to use to escape the hidden network. An ejection seat of a sort, protection in case whatever she had been sensing got the better of her. And I thought that was a pretty neat idea. I'm going to create this sort of trap door so that I can get out of here quickly and not get tied down. By the end of it, it doesn't seem like she's had to use that. If I recall, she manages to sort of get out because she wins, but it's a good idea. So she decides to draw this battlefield, and it's hills and grass, and there's a giant castle with knights guarding it that she's attacking essentially. And then she sees this woman who is beautiful. She's got purple skin and blonde hair, and she just realizes, okay, yeah, that's the one, and goes up to her and says, "What are you?" The woman frowned, her golden eyes filling with anger. "You don't belong here." "Neither do you. You're not from Earth," Widow replied. "I am from this world," the woman replied. "How is it that you exist here? You aren't part of the code. You aren't artificial, and you aren't any of my operating nodes or friendly peripheral code controllers." "No, I'm human." "You are not," the entity replied. "What is your nomenclature?" "Widow." The entity cocked its head. "A spider and a female spouse of a dead husband. You are these things?" "No, it's just a name." "Names are descriptions. Names speak of intent. They have power. In this case, it's just a name. What should I call you?" "My name is Jenna." "Jenna's a beautiful name. Are you artificial intelligence?" "Yes, I am what a human would call artificial intelligence, but you are not human. What are you?" And essentially, Jenna goes back and forth with her about whether or not she can be a person. And Ryan shares a bit more than I expected her to, in being like, no, I am a person, but this is the ability that I have. And Jenna is just like, word, because I have never heard of a person having this kind of ability ever. This is completely new. And honestly, I'm pretty into it, and I would like to know more about it, but you cannot be here. And then they begin to genuinely fight. And Ryan realizes pretty quickly, if it's going to be a hand-to-hand, she is not going to win. That is like, she is just already on the losing side. And finally she realizes, oh, I can just change the landscape we're standing in. I don't need to like fight properly. And she shifts the ground so that Jenna sort of like falls into nothingness for a moment and is like, I'm pretty impressed. You're not like an AI I've seen before. Jenna says, you should have fallen to my first combination of attacks. You can process code faster than any organic being I've encountered. And then says, intriguing. And when Ryan asks, well, what about your creator? Jenna laughs and says, oh, especially not him. He's got a very linear mind, which was an interesting moment because, you know, we've seen that Jenna is like weirdly in love with Dr. Spears. It's clearly a strange situation because she's created by him and he's the only being that she's ever like gotten to know at all. So there's like an obvious reason for that, you know, but hearing her sort of speak almost disrespectfully of him here it gave me like a little bit of hope that she's got her own opinions that she may not share with him. Because there's been this sort of vibe every time she comes up that Spears seems to think he completely knows all that she is about. And I would like it if it turned out that wasn't true. And that she had developed to a point where she was beginning to form her own opinions of him. And he wasn't aware that was even happening, you know? So I love this. I will absorb your being into my code, study you, and hopefully understand how you've come to be. We will commune. And Ryan's like, thank you, but no thank you. I have to go. And this is when she starts to cover her in webbing to sort of trap her in place. And jumping ahead a little bit because we break to go back to Viper, I'm going to finish talking about what's going on with Ryan. Ryan eventually, she manages to like hold Jenna in place for long enough that she can go break into the castle by holding onto the information stream that Jenna is using to continue to communicate with the rest of the system. So Ryan like sees this code cord sort of and like grabs it like it's a zip line and flies straight into the central area because of that being like obvious and exploitable. Which is a pretty, like, I like that idea a lot of just like, oh, you have this door wide open. I'm just going to go through that, you know? And when she goes in, all of the various aspects of the computer system are manifested as different beings sitting at this like long table and the people serving them, and the various like levels of nobility are the different levels of code and like the master code, you know, versus it's like a really interesting fun idea of watching how this would play out, because they do have a weird, like if you get to know the actual hardware of stuff, they have like odd humanish names for different parts of things. So this makes a lot of sense to go in that direction with it. And what Ryan eventually does is like, I am going to overload Jenna with so much information that is irrelevant ultimately, that she won't be able to continue to process all of the other functions that are actually necessary, and she won't be able to get me out. And so she goes up and down the table and tells all of the people to tell Jenna a story. And they get up from their seats and come running over to the throne Jenna's sitting on and all begin talking to her. And Ryan has a really hard time with this because Jenna's in pain and she isn't a fighter and has never hurt or killed anyone. So having to inflict pain, especially on a being that she finds so interesting and so unusual, she doesn't like it. And this is the kind of thing that I'm like, I am the kind of person who I would probably come back if I had to go to war. If there was something, I think I would be the kind of person who would come back completely different, because I would have to shut off a part of myself to get the job done. That just, I don't see being able to still be who I am now and kill people. And that's not to say that maybe in some cases it would even be justified, but that's not even really relevant. I just don't think I could and continue to have the level of empathy that I currently have. It wouldn't be possible for me to do my job. This kind of thing, inflicting pain, it's an artificial intelligence that you could argue isn't even really, really real. It doesn't matter. It would be really hard to do, even knowing that it's absolutely necessary. Eventually, Ryan has to tell herself, they're counting on me, and get that through her head, so to speak, before she is able to really push it to the limit and start to press so that Jenna's screaming. At one point, Ryan has to jump back into the data stream to get out, and the screaming is way worse, and she just thinks about how this is almost like being waterboarded. No, that is rough. I am really curious what Jenna is going to think about Ryan from here on, because up to now, Dr. Spears hasn't known about Ryan's abilities as far as I'm aware. He knows that Ryan is an amazing computer tech whiz, but he didn't know this. If Jenna reports back to him, he's going to figure it out. Something is going to be clear to him, and then he's going to be able to either fight against her or figure out a way to weaponize Jenna or God knows what. So I don't like that. And I weirdly want Ryan and Jenna to be friends. I want them to be able to work together. And I am hoping that something will happen in which Spears either really shows his true colors or kind of pushes Jenna to do something she doesn't want or punishes her, and she will start to realize that he's trash and also that he can't comprehend her and begin to change her loyalty a little bit. That's what I'm hoping for, just because he doesn't deserve her. He doesn't. He's created something better than he is. And that's kind of the goal that we all have in a lot of ways in our lives. But also he wants to enslave her, really, in a way. And buddy, not going to happen. Don't do that. So yeah, in the end, Ryan manages to get out and is successful, and she manages to bring everything down. So when we go back to Viper here, they hear gunfire, and she's with Stryker, and Chance and Scorp are back there, and they hear the gunfire, and they're oh no, Scorp isn't back there. She's with Stryker and Scorp, but Chance, and there's one other person there, I feel maybe it's just Chance. Is that only Chance? But they hear gunfire, they head back there, and it turns out that Whip Scorpion is here. And I keep forgetting how big he is. And he has really, really similar abilities to Scorp. And yet, he's much larger. He's much stronger. And instead of the claws, the whip-like tendrils that come out are pretty fucking badass. And I am afraid for Scorp in this scene. I trust that he will come out on top. I just don't see him dying here. But it really felt like he was a little bit outmatched. And I just don't like that feeling. I barely have gotten to know this guy. I need more time, Takedown, that's the other person who's here. I knew there was somebody else. So, just like Scorp, the man had Takedown by the neck. Oh no, just like Scorp with his reaction time. He had Takedown by the neck, one of the long tendrils wrapped around it, trying to crush his windpipe. Nearby, Chance lay doubled over, his own blood splattered on the stainless steel floor of the lab. And it turns out that Chance got a gut wound. It's a pretty bad one. This is a moment of if you are lucky, I would hate to have seen what would have happened if you are not lucky, because this probably would have just cut you in half. That's the energy that I'm getting from this. And eventually, we have she manages with her super speed, essentially. Jordan patches him up and keeps the wound closed because there's a genuine chance that his guts are just going to pour out. It's a deep cut. But they have to get him and Takedown out of there. The two of them are really doing badly. And Stryker is the one that agrees to bring them up. And this leaves just her and Scorp down here, which I don't like, because again, this entire time, I'm just waiting for shit to actually hit the fan. It just feels like they're being allowed to penetrate deep enough until they aren't going to be able to get out again. And I am waiting for that fucking hammer to drop, you know? So she manages to get him patched up enough that he can be gotten out of there. And as he's being carried off, he's like, what about the people? We can't just leave them here. And Viper says that they'll contact the authorities and have them come in here. And I'm just very interested in whether that's going to be possible, because Elgin Spears is an extremely rich and powerful person. And we all know the law applies differently to people like him. That's just a fact. And will they be willing to just go into his facility and do whatever? I'm not entirely sure they're going to be down for that smoke. I feel like there's going to be more pushback than she seems to anticipate. We'll see. So this is when she hears this weird sound, and she looks up, and she manages to grab Chance and pull him out of the way just in time. There is a drone above her, and it has basically zapped with a laser the area that she and Chance were just in. And these things, there are a lot of them. It is she is just shooting them, taking them down. Stryker is shooting them, and more of them just keep coming. And they're pretty easy to destroy. It's not exactly they're, armor plated or anything. They blow up pretty easily. But there is just such a sheer number that with only a few of them, especially considering that Stryker is about to head back upstairs, it's going to be really hard for her and Scorp to handle them all alone. So yeah, eventually, Stryker goes up and she's like, we'll be right behind you. And he just says, you better be. With his claws held to either side of him, Scorp circled his opponent, his tail poised to strike above his shoulder. This is the part where you run. Run? From this scratch? Whip Scorpion sneered. I heal fast. Good metabolism. Poison doesn't do shit. You're gonna try and talk me down like usual? No, I realized a long time ago you can't be reasoned with, Whip. You're sort of crazy, just has to be squashed. And I hate to say it, but honestly, I believe that that's true. There are some people, I would love to be able to say that you can just reason with anyone and eventually get through to them. No. That way lies madness. Some people, that's just never going to work. And it's the kind of thing that I have always, when I was younger, had that idealism of just everybody just needs to be talked to and understood. But honestly, there is something about the desire to totally sidestep violence in the favor of language that is really privileged and also weirdly cowardly in a way, trying to avoid something that you consider beneath you or messy because you feel like that is a failure of civilization. You're trying to be civilized about this. And the truth is, not everything is, quote, civilized. That's not really how things work. It can't be. Parts of life are messy and violent, and they hurt or kill, and that's just how it goes. and trying to deny that is, you're just going to start chasing your tail. So the two of them go at it pretty hard here. And Scorp is like, it feels like he's got a bit of an advantage at one point, but then he like jumps through the air in such a way that he leaves himself open, and Whip Scorpion like throws him another 20 feet. The first time he gets thrown, he can land on his feet. The second time, he like lands head first and is just going, oh shit, that was not really a great move on my part. And we like the fight between them is what ends this chapter. And when we go to chapter 9, that's when we are back with Jenna and this entire like sort of back and forth with Ryan. So then we go back to Whip Scorpion's disorientation was fading, because the way the last one ended, Scorp had thrown this like exploding drone near him, and it results in a sort of like sensory overload because they have such sensitive receptors, and also just literally burns his face. And it seems like it like fucks him up pretty good, but he does recover really, really fast. And that keeps happening. Scorp just keeps being like, God damn it, he's healing so quickly. And this is an interesting bit here. Scorp had only seen Whip Scorpion show anger a few times. He had always been good at controlling his emotions in front of other people, fancying himself a stone-hard killer. A killer he was, but Scorp knew he was anything but cold. He was typical of many larger-than-life people, full of self-anointed superiority, but at his core, he doubted his own value. I don't appreciate being read like this. Heather, you can tell your husband that he can just fuck off with that, okay? I don't need to be compared to Whip Scorpion. That feels extremely personal and aggressive, and I just personally was offended. So I will appreciate a direct apology by mail any day now. Whip Scorpion wasn't a coward by any means, but he had to prove to everyone that he was better than them, especially Scorp. And there's an interesting bit here where Scorp is like, I wonder if we're related. I don't think we are, because apparently we were only born like 3 days apart, so probably we're not brothers. But I'm also like, well, how do you know that your like birth time is correct, or that his is correct? You might have been born at the same time, and he get handed over to somebody else and given a birth date 2 days out. Like, it's certainly possible, you know, but I like the fact that Scorp is just like, I mean, we're so similar. It just doesn't seem like it could be a coincidence. I don't really believe in that shit anymore. And I'm like, that is a good rule of thumb. The way that things work in this world, just being like, oh, it's just a coincidence with literally anything seems like a really stupid move. So then he has this moment where Whip Scorpion turns and watches Viper handling all these drones. And Scorp has a moment as well of like watching her and just being like, God damn, she is so good. She is so fine. And then he has to shake himself and just be like, okay, now is not the fucking time for this. And then he goes hard on Whip Scorpion because that guy is still distracted, and just really pummels the shit out of him. And at the end of this, Whip is on the ground. He's got like a dislocated arm or shoulder. There's been a lot done to him. And he tries to say, I'm not done. And Scorp is like, no, yeah, you are. And he says, well, if you think I am, then you'd better kill me. And Scorp is like, I'm not doing that. Just retire, man. Because if I see you again, I'm not letting you off. So why don't you just like learn your lesson here and just fucking stop? And it ends with, next time you show up, you may not get so lucky. And then we have the like asterisk break mid chapter. And that was where I was told to stop by Heather's very helpful email instructions. So that's where I stopped. But yeah, I am just like waiting for something to pop out here and screw Viper and Scorp. Because Whip is going to heal somewhat. I just don't think he's going to be the threat anymore. I think he'll probably be like a sort of background threat with a just general like, well, he's healing, so we're on limited time. But I think there's going to be something else. I'm not looking forward to it. I just feel like it's going to be bad. I feel like it's going to be really, really bad. I don't know. But yeah, I'm really, really interested in seeing what's going on with Brian. And if this procedure, it sounds like got started the same day that they began this op. It might have been the day before. It's unclear. But if he's in the middle of it, he'll be wrapped up soon. And I'm really curious if it's going to have an effect on him, like they're breaking in here, if there's going to be any repercussions of that. Because this, like, all the power kind of gets, like, redirected, and all these people are undergoing, and there's a moment, too, where Whip throws a big chunk of machinery and crushes two of the people on their table because they can't move, and it doesn't seem like they're conscious. There's a little kid, I think, at one point, but it doesn't seem like, I can't tell if they're conscious, but they get crushed, and I hate that. That's the point when Scorp is really like, okay, I have to fucking get this guy down because he's going to kill all of these people in here. And while they're not our mission, I also don't want that, But yeah, so that's the end of this section. And I am really excited about Brian. I just this opens a lot of possibilities. I am always a fan of an author deciding to do the thing that feels sort of out of the question, because why wouldn't you? And you just do want to know, I'm sure as a writer, he was like, what would happen if I had Brian do this? Let's see, I want to know. I would like to live vicariously through Brian, unless it goes wrong, in which case I have no interest in that. But yeah. All right. So thank you, Heather, very much for commissioning this episode. She says they are not conscious. Okay, cool. That helps. Good. I'd rather die in my sleep, I guess. And let me see, when's the next one commissioned? Because there's a few. Okay, next Friday, a week from today. Cool. So I'll be able to find out pretty quickly what happens. All right. Thank you again, Heather. And thank you to all of you for listening. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.